Okay, hey everyone, this is a tutorial for setting up a section perspective using your Rhino model. That this can be used as either an underlay to draw on top of or to get kind of the basic section cut and curves and other perspective lines to then do your drawing off of. So I have here a model, just like a really old model, but you can see there's a bit of topography and some kind of, um, structure beyond. And then this is the, let's call it my pavilion that I want to take a section perspective of. So the first thing that you're going to do is actually before anything else is to save a copy of this file so you can cut it and manipulate it and not worry about it. So we'll just call this assignment for whatever section. Okay, so now that we've saved our file, we want to figure out where we want to cut a section from. So if you haven't gotten to this point yet, then the easiest and quickest way to do that is to use a clipping plane. So I can come here and I'm going to do it. I like to use the top view, so I can see exactly where I'm laying it out. But then obviously I need to set it up from the side so that it actually is vertical. So I have this clipping plane, and at the moment it's not doing anything in the perspective view. It's cutting through the top because that's where I initially created it. You can go to the properties on the right of the while you're selecting that clipping plane, and I want to take off the top view and have it show up in perspective. Um, okay, so the other thing that I'm using, if you're not familiar with it, is this tool called Gumball. You can toggle it on and off down here on the tool panel below. It's just a kind of conglomerate of quick tools all in one place. So you can drag it, you can like whatever's highlighted, if it's this surface, for example, as well, I can use it to drag that. So right now I'm dragging the clipping plane. I can use it to move it a certain distance. If I just click once on that up arrow, I can say like, okay, move it up 25 feet. I can also say move it down minus 25, it'll go back down. Same thing in every direction. And then the other main component is rotating. So you can rotate by a certain amount. If you click on one of those curves, you can also just click on a curve and drag it and kind of move it willy-nilly. Um, so yeah, those are the kind of basic main functions of Gumball. There's a few other fun things you can do with it, but that's not the purpose of this tutorial. So anyway, so I'm using that so that I can quickly move the clipping plane around. So right now I'm cutting through this direction. Let me check first and say like, let me look at the other way. And as you notice, I just cut through and I don't see like that house beyond. It looks like I'm kind of cutting through the wrong way. So again, you can flip the direction over here in the properties panel. And now I can see the house beyond and I'm cutting through my pavilion. I'm like, okay, is that interesting? Well, I get a nice view of the topography, and again, I kind of see it in relationship to the other structure on the site, but I'm not sure that this view is really the most interesting and telling of my pavilion. Like, it doesn't really give me a good sense of the shape of it and kind of the experience of occupying that space and walking through it. Um, so I'm not really liking this. It's a little bit boring and flat. So let me go back and rotate it again. So one option would be from this side, and I can pull it and kind of look at that, and there's some really interesting profiles that are being created that cut through that roof. So maybe, something like this would be kind of fun, or maybe that would be really interesting, where I kind of see the cut of this surface, but then I still see the overall form of the pavilion beyond, and this kind of opening, and the entryway, and whatever's happening below here, whether it's another space or it's the foundation, or yeah. Um, Maybe in this case, the only thing I'm missing is kind of a better view of the topography in that house beyond. So I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. And now I kind of can play with, okay, where is it cutting through? And again, I can get some interesting, really interesting sections being cut through, um, and sort of see, the relationship to the topography and other things on the site. You can also drag it from here. Um, I mean, that's pretty fun. And yeah, maybe I want to go this way. So anyway, that's just to show you that you want to think about all of the sites and kind of the view when you're cutting your section. And not just, I mean, it is mainly about the pavilion, but then we're also trying to give people through this drawing a sense not only of just the construction and the structure, but the experience of it and the feel of being in that space and on the site. So keep that in mind. Okay, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to turn it back around and use that view because I thought that was really nice section cut. Okay, all right. So now I know where I want my section to be. I'm going to keep the clipping plane there for a minute, and we're basically going to save a view so we don't lose this. So you want to make sure that you're in perspective. You want to change the lens length down to something between 20 to 30. That will give it a more human kind of perspective. So you see all of a sudden this roof pitch became a lot more dramatic and the angles of the perspective are much more pitched. Um, Maybe 20 is a bit too much. Let's see what 30 gives us. It's not that. So I'm going to do like 25. And then you want to figure out how close you're going to get to the pavilion and then, kind of the exact angle you're going to set up so you can see sort of the relationship to the site. Um, okay. And then the other thing you want to try to do to some extent, especially for a project of this size, this scale, is give us more of a human eye view into the space. Most probably. I mean, some of you, it may make sense that you give a view that's, right in the middle and kind of exactly perpendicular to the sectional cut. And that could be where the ground is flat or where you actually see it receding. Um, and that would be sort of, more comparable to the LTL drawings that we saw in the lecture. Um, But in any case, you probably want something that's a little bit closer to the ground. And I have a scale figure in here which helps with that. And then the other thing, once you kind of figure out the exact position and view, if you're going straight on or going from the side, is that you want to make sure that any elements that are orthogonal and straight are parallel and they're not. See how this is kind of, this edge is skewed right now to that one. And the way to do that is to set the Z location and the Z target at the exact same value. So make that 110 and this one 110. And there you go. Now those edges are straight. Now I'm going to pull back just a little bit. Okay. Okay, so once we have that, and I'm saying this is my chosen view, I'm going to set the view, I'm going to name it and save it. And this is my perspective section. Okay. So I can always go back to it. All right. Now, what I want to do is set up the section cut. I'm going to go back to the top view. Everything is still here. And I'm going to keep the clipping plane for a moment for a reference. And what I can do with it is make a plane and do 3-point and basically just use the clipping plane and make an actual plane. You can see where that section is going to show up. And you want the plane to cut through the entire, like everything that you're going to need. So I made it longer so it'll cut through the topography. And now I don't need the clipping plane anymore. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to deselect that cut plane. Then I'm going to do split, use the plane, and there you go. And before you unselect anything, you want to cap. So any open edges, open geometry will be closed off and you'll have nice clean edges for making 2D. Okay, so now I'm just going to go and delete everything that is cut and not used. You could also alternatively make, a new layer and put all that stuff on there and hide it. That works as well. And I can delete this cut plane. And then let's go back and look at our view. And there it is, section cut. And the one thing that you're definitely going to use this for is for the main lines of your drawing. So essentially you could, select everything and do make 2D. And we want it from the perspective. Make sure that viewport is selected. Do make 2D. And do we want hidden lines? Let's do without hidden lines and see if we get enough. And group the output. Okay, that sounds good. All right. And where's my drawing? Let's do select curve. Okay, it came out way over here because I'm way. Okay. So we got overall lines. It does look like it might be useful in this case because of the kind of curving and folded geometry. It could be beneficial to try to do make 2D, maybe another, like put this on one layer, sort of the baselines. Let's do a new layer and say like baselines. And then do the hidden lines and see if that helps fill in some of this, and then start to, clean up the geometry where needed. So I would, go ahead and like connect that point, for example, stuff like that. Clean up this edge that was modeled not correctly, but now we can fake it in the drawing and make it look like the ground is intersecting it as it's supposed to. Maybe delete these two lines that are probably just surfaces inside that are a mistake. I don't know. Anyway, so clean up the geometry as much as you can here, probably. And then the other thing that you can do, you can see it a bit, just from the Make 2D, but you can also, let me go back over here to, take a section cut and get just the cut lines. And that usually just helps me if you have maybe some geometry that's a bit confusing for you in the Make 2D to see exactly where the section cut is happening. So you can do section, and we want to use these objects. And we're going to start it from here, and we're going to end it back there. And there it is, nice and highlighted. Let's group those lines. Oh, yeah, enter. Okay, let's group those lines. Let's do a new layer. That's the section cut. I'm going to put them on there. I'm going to change it to red so I can see it. And now we have those nice red lines. And I can select those objects and rotate them to be flat and move it over to um, the drawing and line that up and use that. So anyway, the last thing, so now you have your line work, you know where your section cut is. You basically can take that line work and, like I said, clean it up in Rhino quickly and then export it to Illustrator or Photoshop to continue working on the line weights and adding some details. Another option would be export it and, draw on top of it. So either do the basic line weights in Illustrator or in CAD and then print that out, put some vellum on top and start drawing in details and shading. One other thing that you can do and you can use this view for is possibly to set up a really basic underlay for your drawing as well to get some shading and some texture going. So in this case, I can play around with using the different modes of display. Right now we're in shaded, there's ghosted, so maybe I look at ghosted. I can go to the display properties for that. I'm going to change the background to just white. And I'm going to turn on shadows. I'm going to turn off surface iso curves and maybe even edges. That's kind of nice. So you can play around with this and see if any sort of, you can use any of these views as like an underlay. So we're not going for a fully rendered look. We're not adding materiality to this view, although you can draw that in, maybe drawing light lines to indicate the CLT panels and joints and some texture. You can add texture in Photoshop using images and as well. But this is really kind of useful for understanding, especially if you have complex geometry or folded curving surfaces, and as well just for getting an idea about kind of light. You can take it really detailed and start playing around with the sun and kind of getting the position accurate for those of you who are really, your projects really revolve around sunlight and the position of the sun. But as you can see, this just kind of gives a nice overall effect and view of kind of the project. So since you have the curves, the actual 2D line work, I would say you probably would turn off surface edges so that wouldn't muddy up your beautiful line drawing that you're going to make. And yeah, you can also play with the rendered view. That's going to be much more high contrast depending on the sun and probably a bit trickier to handle. So I would probably stick to either just using shaded or ghosted view and playing with the background and deselecting line work. And then from this, you're gonna do like if you get like I'm gonna export, let's say this image. I'm gonna turn off curves as well. There we go. So you can do capture to file, and I want a transparent background, or you can stick with the white background. Transparent's nice if you're going to do other work in Photoshop to add any sort of texture and trees and things like that. Pick a high resolution so it's a good quality image, and then hit OK. Let's save it and we'll do test section underlay. Okay. And let's just see if we can look at that in Photoshop. And there you go. And so on top of that, I can either bring this image into Illustrator and lay it under my line work and play with the opacity and that sort of thing, or vice versa, bring in, line work and put it on top of this. I don't know where the stop went.